strings attached and no boundaries, no fine print, no hidden catch, come feeling free. There are so many beautiful feelings, they're so hard to resist. Let the love flow around, let love persist, opening the door of your heart. Let love make a start, embrace all those around you. Let them know how you feel when you
Hello.
unlock the door with the key that love gives you. Love is for you and me. Love can set us free. We all can make a fresh start if we open our hearts. You got to open up the door to your heart and let everyone know just how you feel. And then you can let them in when you unlock the door with the key that love gives you. Oh.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Venerable. Good evening, Sis Sylvia Bay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Thank you for coming to our last session of our Vesak program with Ajahn Brahmali. Let's see what's next. I think we are doing the evening puja first. Great. Salutation to the Triple Gem. Let us all pay respects to the Triple Gem.
Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of the Buddha. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho Vijacharana Sampanno Sugato Lokavidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasarati Satta Deva Manusanang Buddho Bhagavati. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of the Dhamma. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipassiko Opanaiko Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuhiti. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of the Sangha. Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Ujjupatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Nyaya Patipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sami Patipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Yadidang Chattari Purisa Yugani Akta Purisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttaram Punya Ketang Lokasati. Let's be.
Okay, let's put our palms together to invite Ajahn out into the hall. Welcome, Ajahn. Let's do 3 prostrations to Ajahn, please.
Excellent. Okay, very good.
Good evening, Ajahn Brahmali. Welcome to Buddhist Fellowship again. Would you maybe request the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts? And I know you reminded us not to ask for the 3 precepts and the 5 refuges.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Of course, we're going to always start with the most important thing, which is the practical application of the Dhamma, which is the 3 refuges and 5 precepts, not the 5 refuges and 3 precepts. So that's good. It's good we got that straight. So let's start with that. Before we start with that, Venerable Ajita, where you come from? Come from Indonesia, or are you here? Yeah. Okay. How long are you staying for? 27th. Okay. Welcome. Nice to see you again. How long? When did I see you last? 2.5 years ago. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Very good. She's one of Ajahn Brahma's nuns from Perth, now living in Indonesia. So it's really cool to see her here. Okay, so let's do the 3 refuges and 5 precepts together. As usual, I will say it first, and then please repeat afterwards. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi.
Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Ti saranagammanang nittitang.
Amma bante.
Panati pata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majjapamadhatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majjapamadhatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena suggating yante, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbutting yante, tasma silang visoda. Yay!
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay. Very good. Wow, the Ajahn Brahmali disciples are very strong. That's good. So, okay.
Ajahn, may we request for 10 minutes of meditation?
Okay, excellent.
Followed by the Dhamma talk, please.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do some meditation first. It's always good to start by calming the mind a little bit. And if that means you fall asleep, then that's also good. You get a bit of rest, so that's always handy. And just allow the world to fade into the background. Just allow the mind just gently to come to peace by itself. Not doing anything, not trying to make it peaceful, but just allowing the process to happen by getting out of the way and inclining the mind towards peace. And one of the skillful ways of thinking about meditation is to conceive it as resting time, not meditation as such. The moment you think of it as meditation, you think it is something you have to do. Actually, it is something you don't have to do. It is essentially just a matter of resting, allowing things to be, as if you're sitting down in an armchair after a long day's work, and just allowing the mind to flow, not resisting anything, but going along with whatever is happening here. And towards the end of the meditation, just try, if you can, to send some thoughts of kindness to all your spiritual companions here at the Buddhist Fellowship. Thank you, everyone, for being my spiritual friend. Thank you for making this place possible, this beautiful place of spiritual practice. Every one of you, I wish you well. I wish you happiness. Okay, so that's the end of the meditation here. So, excellent, yeah. Okay, so these are really important, obscure suttas, so you have to know them. That's what that means. I'm just being naughty. This is the thing about being a monk. You have to be a bit naughty, otherwise it gets so boring to be a monk. So we do these kind of crazy things. That's what life is like. So this is a question from online. Some of the people, I think someone here at the BF, this is what they asked for. They wanted to hear about obscure suttas you need to know. And I don't know if you can read my mind or read my heart, but this is kind of really down my line. Yeah, this is kind of exactly the thing that kind of gets me interested, because I like to sometimes look at kind of suttas that are a bit different, because it gives you sometimes a slightly different perspective on the Dhamma and what this is about. So I was very happy when I saw that title. So some very good titles, actually. They all, 𝐿, are you the one who, you got them from, where did you get them from? Online?
No, 𝐶𝑠 Kim.
Really? Okay, wow. That's really, really cool. So, okay, so really, really good titles. So, because they are obscure, they may not be for everyone, but you're going to have to endure for that, because this is what we're going to do for the next hour. So these suttas, we're going to look at, we'll see how far we get. There's a couple of suttas I kind of intend to look at. And the first one is one that I always felt was really hard to understand. And until I started translating the suttas, and I was helping some other people with translation. And when you translate, you have to understand. Because you have to decide on the meaning. If you can't decide on the meaning, you can't translate properly here. So it kind of forces you to look at the sutta in a new way and trying to understand what lies behind it. So this was one of those suttas that I never really kind of grasped until I looked at it carefully, and then I kind of wrote this kind of tiny little mini paragraph on the meaning of the sutta, and I sent it off to Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi in the US because he was doing the translation. I said, "This is what this means." kind of arrogant young monk. Yeah, Bhikkhu Bodhi is so senior. This is what it means. And Bhikkhu Bodhi said, okay, that's really good. Okay, I'll put that in the footnote. So that's actually in the footnote now. If you look at it in the Anguttara translation, you find the footnote in there. That was from that exchange between myself and Bhikkhu Bodhi, which is kind of nice. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to look at this. So, are you ready? Yeah? Okay. See what happens. So, here we go. Okay, so this sutta is called rooted, like a mulaka, I think is the Pali word. And is the Anguttara 1058, and there are a few different versions of this sutta found around the Anguttara Nikaya. So I'll just start with a kind of preliminary part here. So let's have a look at the preliminary part. So this is what the Buddha says. It starts off by all these wanderers. Wanderers, of course, are monks or nuns of other religions. And they go to the monks and they have all these questions to the monks, and the monks don't know what to say. They're kind of completely dumbfounded by these questions. And now they go to the Buddha and say, oh, please, Venerable Sir, could you please explain to us what we should say when we get these questions? And the Buddha says, monks, if the wanderers who follow other paths, or wanderers of other religions, if you like, if they were to ask, reverence, all things have what as their root? What produces them? What is their origin? What is their meeting place? What is their chief? What is their ruler? What is their overseer? What is their core? What is their culmination? What is their final end? You should answer them in this way. So what do you think of these questions? Would you know what to say if someone asks you this question? It's kind of strange, isn't it? It's one of these things you think, what on earth is going on here? It's like you. And that's interesting, because when you have that question, what on earth is going on, but we have good reasons to think that it goes back to the Buddha and all the earliest days, that's always an opportunity to kind of go deeper into things and understand things, maybe in a new way, to expand your viewpoint and to kind of see things from a slightly different angle. I think one of the most interesting things for me about the way the Buddha always teaches is that he shows often the same thing from many different angles. You don't understand it from this angle, he gives another angle, and he gives you a third angle, and he kind of gives you all of these ways, and sometimes kind of falls into place. You think, now I get it, that's what it means, and you kind of get this deeper appreciation of the path. Ultimately, of course, what we want to do, and the thing that I've kind of said many times during this time here, is that we want to do things that actually we feel the path, we feel the urgency of the practice, we feel the importance of being kind and all of these kind of things. That's really where we want to be. So this is probably maybe going to be a little bit more intellectual, so I'm going to kind of forget about everything I've said so far. But that's ultimately the purpose. So even here, we're going to try to kind of get a feeling for the Dhamma. This is more important ultimately than the intellectual understanding. It's interesting, in the Pali Suttas, you find this word called the Dhamma Veda and Atta Veda. And the word Veda in Pali has this mixture. On the one hand, Ved is connected to the word Vidya. You know the word Vidya? And so that means like understanding, insight or whatever. And the word Vidya is connected to the English word wit. What does the English word wit mean? It's an interesting word. It means obviously you are funny, you're witty. That's what it refers to that. But wit also means intelligence in English. A person of ready wit. It actually means someone who is intelligent. And it's related to the German word Wissen. Wissen in German means also knowledge and understanding. So this is actually these are Indo-European languages. They're all related to each other. And so that's kind of where these ideas come from. So Dhamma Veda, Atta Veda has this root Ved, which comes from understanding, wit on the one hand. On the other hand, it's related to Vedana, Vedeti, which means to feel, right? A combination of feeling and understanding. And this is the most powerful thing in the world, when we both feel and understand. And there's a very good word for that in English. It's called inspiration. When you're inspired, you feel something. You feel uplifted. I want to go for it. Wow, this is really good stuff. And you feel kind of this energy, this push forward. But on the other hand, inspiration also means that you have an understanding of what is going on. You're inspired because you clue into something. So there's a mixture of understanding and feeling, and this is one of the most powerful things on the path. So when you have the Dhamma Veda, it means that you are inspired by the Dhamma. And because you are inspired by the Dhamma is the teaching of the Buddha, that Dhamma has a goal. There's a purpose for this practice. So we understand the teaching, but there's a purpose for the practice. That's called the Atta. It's the goal of the practice. So inspired by the teaching, but you're also inspired by where that teaching is heading. The purpose of that teaching. Nibbana, if you like, or happiness, or end of suffering, whatever you want to call it. But you're inspired by that understanding what this is about. So this is the kind of what we are trying to do when we understand the word of Buddha, is to get this Atta Veda and Dhamma Veda. And this is kind of a similar thing that we're trying to do today in theory. So we'll see what happens as we go along here. So, so all these wanderers, maybe we should start off by discussing why do they ask these questions? What are these wanderers on about? They seem like a weird kind of questions to go around asking each other. And probably, my guess would be that they ask these questions because they have maybe believe in some kind of God. What is the origin? What do things rooted in? Well, maybe they're rooted in the creative power of a God. God creates the universe, bang. That's kind of was a standard idea in the ancient Brahmanical religion as well, that from Brahma the universe emanates. So kind of Brahma creates the universe in a sense. What produces it? What is the origin? Again, is this idea of maybe being created by the supreme God. What is the chief, the ruler, the overseer of everything? Well, again, quite likely they would talk about a God that oversees everything, that is the chief. You can imagine this. Most religions in the world are theistic. They have an idea of some kind of supreme power in the universe. And I think these are very likely to be where these things come from, because the majority of religions have usually had some kind of God idea behind kind of the surface of the world. So that's my guess. Of course, when the Buddha gets these questions, like he often does, he reinterprets the whole question and looks at it from a very different angle. Instead of understanding it from that God perspective, he then adapts it into the Dhamma point of view. And this is what makes this interesting, because any existing teaching, any existing words or doctrine can be turned around so as to adapt beautifully to the teaching of the Buddha. So even these obscure questions, all things have what as their root, well, that too can be adapted to the Buddhist teachings. So let's see what the Buddha has to say. Now it gets really exciting. Are you excited? I'm kind of building this up, so you get really excited here. I'm getting a bit excited myself, actually. What is it again? See. No. So before I do that, I'm just going to torture you a little bit by having a bit of tea. The sadistic monks will.
You succeeded, Ajahn.
You know this sutta?
No, I don't. I'm very
Wow.
excited now, yes.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. I found a sutta that Kim doesn't know. That's pretty hard, actually. Okay, so here we go. So let's see. So the first answer, of all things have what as their root? All things are rooted in desire. Maybe not so strange when you see it. Maybe you can kind of sort of understand that. All things are rooted in desire. So what exactly does that mean? Well, to understand what this means, first of all, we have to understand what all things means. What is the meaning of all things? Because rooted in desire, is this microphone here rooted in desire? What about my tea? Is that root? I think the tea probably is rooted in desire, actually. I'm not so sure about the microphone. But so, what does it mean that all things? What are these all things that we're talking about? And it kind of is weird if you think about the external things in the world, yeah, the things around us, you know, the roof, or maybe the galaxies, or the universe, or even this kind of ordinary things that are around us. How can they be rooted in desire? These are kind of independent of desire, right? They exist on their own. We can all see this one. It's kind of a common good. Yeah, we all have it. Well, like not something like that. And so how can these things be rooted in desire? Or what does all things actually mean? And in Buddhism, the idea of all things, usually remember what we are talking about in Buddhism. What is important is the idea of suffering. Yeah, it's the idea of personal experience. Suffering is always about personal experience. So when we talk about all things in Buddhism, what we really mean is everything within personal experience. That's what we mean. And so when you start to think about it, what about this thing here? Well, actually, this thing too is actually just a personal experience when it comes down to it. How do we know this is what this is? Well, we know what it is because we can see a shape. You can see a color. You can see white, and you can see a kind of silvery color. When you hold it, you can feel something, but that feeling is also a personal experience. So everything with this thing is also really a personal experience. What is this thing apart from that personal experience? Well, it's very hard to say. You can't really say, does it have any life on its own without that personal experience? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, if you think about Buddhist history, a large part of Buddhist history is, of course, philosophy. And one of the famous branches of Buddhist philosophy is the branch of everything comes from mind. Everything is mind-made. Yeah, Chitta, Maya kind of school of Buddhism. Everything is made by mind. And the reason they say that is because anything that we can experience in the world, in the end, comes back to personal experience. It's the same thing with this thing here. So in a sense, when you start to think about it, when we talk about personal experience, actually, we do maybe mean everything in the world, yeah? What about the galaxy outside of us? What would the galaxies or the stars in the night sky actually come down to Perth? If you want to see the stars in the night sky, very beautiful in Perth. We were talking about that the other day. Yeah, in Singapore, can you see the stars in Singapore sometimes? But if it isn't raining, if it isn't overcast, if the light isn't too strong, maybe you can see them. That's difficult in Singapore, right? Come down to Bodhinyana Monastery in Perth, you look in the night sky, wow, the night sky is so beautiful. Yeah, really, really beautiful. And I'm sure it's the same in Dhammasara Monastery where Venerable Ajita was ordained. So, but what is that Milky Way that you see in the sky? And that too is really, in the end, just a personal experience. You see it, that sight, that experience exists in your mind. What is that world apart from that experience? Well, very hard to say. Is it something? Maybe, but we don't know exactly what it is. So in the end, it is not very wrong to say that all things, personal experience, are very, very closely related to each other. There isn't very much separation between the two, especially from a Buddhist point of view, where the world really, that personal experience is what it really is all about. That's where dukkha is found. That's where sukha is found. That is the world we want to sort out. That is the world that matters. That is the world of impermanence. Yeah, that is the world where we see non-self. That is the world, as far as Dhamma and spiritual practice is concerned, is the only world that really has any bearing anyway. So now you can start to understand what is going on here. All things in terms of personal experience are rooted in desire. Well, what that means, of course, is that the whole process of existence depends on desire. You get reborn because of desire. Samsara goes on because of desire. And things roll on in this way. Without desire, everything comes to a stop. That's what it means. Sometimes when you have the idea of samsara, remember that even the idea of samsara is really just an internal thing. Yeah, what is samsara? Well, samsara is your internal experience of the world. It's a kind of forever, as it says in the Sutta, the roaming around in samsara, going from one life to another one, never really standing still. That is a personal experience. Yeah. So samsara is actually your experience right now. It is not kind of the universe or all these beings coming together. It is your personal experience. That is samsara. That samsara is perpetuated. is kept going by desire. So this is all things are rooted in desire. It's quite profound, when you start to look at it. And it says something about the Buddhist worldview that is quite different from the ordinary worldview of most people. It's personal experience that matters. You may know about the famous Rohitassa Sutta. Do you know the Rohitassa Sutta, Upal? Can you remember the Rohitassa Sutta? No? Can you remember? Okay, I'm going to teach you the Rohitassa Sutta. Okay, very famous sutta. Yeah, okay, very famous. It's kind of famous because Ajahn Brahmali called Rohitassa the first astronaut. That's what he called Rohitassa. He said he's going to walk to the end of the universe. So he was like an astronaut. Of course, he never got there, but that's another matter. So in this sutta, the Buddha says, you made a mistake. You're not supposed to walk to the end of the universe. Forget about that. The world, the Buddha says, is found in this fathom-long body with its consciousness. The world is your experience, right? That is the beginning of the world. That is the end of the world. That is where the world is found. And that is where you can understand why all things here must mean personal experience, because the Buddha says so in another sutta. This is the advantage of having a kind of broad understanding of the suttas. It starts to click together. Why does the Buddha say all things here? Well, it must be related to the Rohitassa Sutta, where the Buddha says, actually, yes, the world is found in this fathom-long body. The beginning of the world is found here, because this is where desire is, right? The end of the world is found here, because the end of desire also found in this body and mind that we have. So Rohitassa, Upal, because it's your birthday a couple of days ago, I'll give you special attention. So Rohitassa was this fellow who said, I want to find the end of the universe, the end of the world. So he said, I'm going to find it by walking. He had some supernormal power. He could walk incredibly fast. So he walked and walked and walked and never got to the end of the world. And he goes to the Buddha and says, I can't find the end of the world. And the Buddha says, this is where the end of the world is, within this fathom-long body. So that is the Rohitassa. Anguttara Nikaya 4's 41, something like that, 41. Kim, can you enlighten us? Does anyone know which number? I think around 41. 44? 45? 45? Are you sure? You found it? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you knew it off the top of your head. Wow, that would have been very, very impressive. 45. Okay. So it was ballpark right. So all things are rooted in desire, because all experience ultimately emerges from desire. If desire is gone, no more experience. This is kind of the flip side of this coin, right? If experience is rooted in desire, it means that if there is no desire, no experience. The end of craving means that experience comes to an end. All things, sabbe Dhamma. This is a very, very this is the most all-encompassing way of saying things in the Pali language. Sabbe Dhamma literally means everything. Dhamma means like quality or thing in general. So when you say that all things are rooted in desire, you're saying all things end when desire comes to an end. So again, this is very powerful, right? And it gives you a very clear guide to what Nibbana and Parinibbana actually is in Buddhism. It is extraordinarily profound. And it's very different from how many people think it is. But this is a very kind of good pointer right there. So no one has walked out yet? Okay, good. Actually, if you walk out, it's okay. It doesn't matter. One of the nice things about being a monk is that people kind of walking out while you give the talk. It happened to me many times. It happens all the time, especially in Australia, because in Australia, this monk is boring. Let's walk off. And they kind of, and it's kind of, it's actually really good because it really kind of forces you not to take yourself too seriously. So it's really, really handy. So anyway. Let's go on to the next one here. All things are produced by attention. So what does this mean? If everything is rooted in desire, then the rootedness means that this is kind of the very basic kind of thing which gives rise to things. The root is like the very source, the very kind of most fundamental way of giving rise to things. But produced here by attention means more like moment-to-moment production. This is kind of the idea here. So moment to moment, what is it that we experience? Right now, what do you experience right now? Maybe you experience my voice, or maybe you experience some commentary in your head. Maybe you experience something completely different. Maybe you are far away in a different galaxy, far, far away. I don't know. Everyone here probably experiences things slightly differently, right? It depends on what we attend to. Attention is the critical thing that decides what we experience. Sometimes we have this naive idea that what we experience depends on what is available. Yeah, okay, all of these sights are available, my eyes are open, so I experience what is there. Or because there is sound, my ear is here, okay, so I will hear. But it's not as simple as that. Because sometimes we can be, and all of you will know this already, sometimes you can be seeing things, but you're so focused on what you are listening to, you don't actually see anything at all. The kind of things pass in front of you, you don't actually see it, even though your eyes are open. If you go into a deep state of samadhi, very, very deep, the sense is completely shut off. Even if your eyes are open, there are sights to be seen, you don't see anything because your attention is directed 100% inward. So attention is a very important factor. That is a critical factor which decides the experience in every given moment. What you're experiencing now depends on that attention, where it is kind of leaning, where it is directed. And that's very interesting, because what that means, it means that the quality of that attention would be very significant in how we experience the world. This is part of the idea of dependent origination. In dependent origination, you have the idea of phassa, of contact, things coming together. And one way it is described is that you have the I, you have the object. When the two come together, consciousness arises. The three coming together, the sangiti of the three, sangati of the three is contact. That is the experience when you kind of make contact with the world, so to speak. And one of the critical factors there is attention, where you are directing your mind, how you're directing it. So in other words, if you are interested in worldly things, your mind will go to worldly things. You will see all the beautiful things. You will see here, you look around, you see something beautiful, and you think, wow, that's really wonderful. Or if you are interested in spiritual things, you notice completely different things. You know, wow, the Buddha's on the wall over there. Cool. Or you notice, wow, it's so peaceful when I meditate. So your attention will be directed by the qualities of your heart. So how you developed you are, how much right view you have. These will be the critical factors that decide where you attend and how you attend. If you have a tendency to be depressed, then your attention will come with that slightly heavy feeling, and then that will color how you experience the world. But if you have a kind of bright heart and a kind of really energetic and happy person, then that will color the world you see. So your attention is actually very, very important in how we experience the world. And this is one of the more important ways the path works, because the way the path works is that it purifies our attention. It allows us to attend to new things. When you see something beautiful in the city, you're a monk, you go into the city, and sometimes you see things that maybe you shouldn't be seeing, maybe. Other times you see things which are, so then what you see will depend on how developed your attention is at that particular time. Are you inclining towards restraint? Are you inclining to see the danger in the sensual pleasures of the world, or what is going on? So attention is very critical, and this is what develops as you go through the path, so that all things that are produced by attention, they will then change depending on where on the path you are. But everything is produced by attention. Without attention, nothing happens. There's no experience of anything without attention. That is why all things are produced by that. So one moment to moment, new things are produced. But ultimately, everything arises because of attention. So is this sutta obscure enough, or is it not obscure enough?
Excellent, thank you, Ajahn.
Excellent. Okay, I'm glad. Okay, we have one vote in favor. That's wonderful. Actually, your vote counts for many votes, 𝐁𝐫𝐴, so I think that's... All right, so let's go to the next one. We're still on the kind of arising of things. All things originate from contact. Contact is phassa. And one way of thinking of phassa is simply as experience. All things originate through experience. So phassa, again, is this idea I just mentioned before of you have the object and the sense coming together, and consciousness arises. The three coming together is phassa, contacting the world, experiencing the world through that. So the idea here is that this is the basic way in which anything happens in life. Yeah, this is how things, again, how you experience the world. You cannot experience the world even if you look completely. Forget about attention for a moment. The idea is that sense organ and object have to come together. Consciousness arises, and without that, nothing is going to happen. So if you don't have hearing, if you are born deaf, you're not going to hear anything, yeah, because the ear is just not there. If you get reborn in a realm where there is no certain sensory impressions are impossible, yes, maybe certain devaloka you cannot maybe, I don't know, smell anything or whatever because you're so high up. Well, of course, if there's no smells to be had, and even if you have a nose, you can't smell that. So this is kind of the idea, contact, everything originates through these things. So again, if you want to, if all things are to cease, you cease contact, nothing originates. And of course, one part of the Buddhist path is precisely to move towards a cessation of contact itself. That's kind of where the path is going in many suttas. So this is a little bit more kind of technical, perhaps, but the idea is very similar to the previous one, originating or arising through attention. Contact is necessary. Let's just move on to the next one. All things meet in feeling. This is kind of interesting, isn't it? Pali word for meeting is sam or sadhana. I'm not sure if that is very helpful for you, but so all things meet in feeling. And this is kind of really fascinating here. And again, it is not very obvious what it necessarily means. What does it mean to meet in feeling? What exactly is the kind of the idea here? And the idea, as I understand it, and it seems it was accepted by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, I always have to lean on other authorities when they say these things, is that feeling is the critical ingredient in our experience. All things meet in feeling because that is where everything becomes meaningful. Things are meaningful through feeling. Nothing is meaningful without feeling. Yeah. Why? Well, because it is feeling that motivates us to do anything in life. You feel something about something. You wake up in the morning. You know you have to go to work. Okay. So this is just a feeling that you have to go to work, or you have to go to school, or you have to go to the BF center, you have to do whatever. You are motivated by that because it feels something to you. When you eat, again, it is a feeling of eating that motivates you. You have an idea of what it's going to feel like, and so you're motivated to eat. Everything relates to feeling. Everything is either good, bad, or neutral, right? You come to the BF, hopefully because it's good. I'm just guessing, but I assume so. Maybe it's neutral, thinking, today is a bit neutral, I'll go anyway, because feeling neutral. But neutral is all right. But there is always some kind of feeling related to these things. Feeling is what drives us in life. If you try to imagine a life completely without feeling, nothing is good or nothing is bad, you wouldn't be able to make any choices, because things would be literally meaningless. You see those Buddhist flags back there, and they are quite nice. They've got nice colors, red, orange, yellow, blue, white. White is not a color, but anyway. And they have those Dhammachakas up there. And it's quite attractive. You have it gives a rise to a feeling. But imagine there was no feeling at all. It was just a pattern which gave rise to nothing. You wouldn't be able to make any choice. You wouldn't be able to be motivated by anything in life. Everything would stop. Everything would be completely irrelevant. You would just lie there until you died because you had no motivation for doing anything. So everything meets in feeling, because feeling is the critical phenomenon that makes life meaningful. There is no meaning without feeling. And what that means is that if we can understand feeling properly, we can get a lot of insight into what it means to be a human being or to be any being. If you understand feeling in the right way, that is one of the great ways for enlightenment to happen. Because if you understand that feelings are unreliable, that they are uncertain, that they cannot be sustained, etc., etc., then, of course, if this is the meaning, and the meaning cannot be sustained, and you're always going to lose it, and ultimately it will turn bad, then you can start to reject the whole of existence. Because feeling is the critical thing. Through that contemplation itself, everything can be given up as unsatisfactory or suffering and problematic. So all things meet in feeling. Feeling is that very important deciding point. And we had a look at dependent origination the other day, talking about the same thing. The idea that feeling leads to craving. All desire comes from feelings. It's the same kind of thing. And it kind of, so in many ways, in some ways, feeling can be said to be the most important of the 5 khandhas, the Vedana khandha, because of this role it has. All right, next one. All things have mindfulness as their ruler. I have changed the sequence here, so I apologize. The other sequence actually has samadhi first, but I thought, no, I want to have mindfulness first. So hope I haven't made any bad karma by changing the sutta around. What would the Buddha say? His disciples start turning things around, right? Okay, so I don't know. But this seems, to me, this is more, maybe because of my delusion, but it seems like mindfulness should become before samadhi. So I'm not sure why samadhi comes first. So have I made a lot of bad karma, Venerable, do you think, by turning this around? I think, am I in deep trouble, serious trouble here? I need expert advice. Can you guide me? Oh well. Okay, no, you don't have to answer that one. I just... too difficult. So what does this mean? And what it means is that, and this one is fairly easy to understand, what it means is that when you have good mindfulness, you feel in charge of yourself, you feel in charge of your life. Why? Because you are aware. And when you have strong awareness, you can take countermeasures before bad things happen. That's kind of the point of awareness. And this is a very common thing that you will hear, especially in Vipassana circles. And of course, Vipassana circles, many good things about the way they practice. And one of the things they say, well, if you have mindfulness, then when something goes wrong, you can just be aware and you can go with it and let it kind of fade away. That's one way that mindfulness works. Or, in my opinion, even better, if you have mindfulness and you can see things going wrong, you can think, okay, I find this person really difficult. If I hang out with this person a lot longer, I'm going to start to get irritated, then I'm going to get angry, then I'm going to get irate, and then I might kill them. So I better... So I got to restrain here. So mindfulness tells you when you are going down the wrong track, and it gives you the potential for taking another direction before it's too late. And too late doesn't mean at the time of killing, it means at the time of anger arising or irritation arising. That's what we want to avoid. You want to have an even mind in life. We don't want to have this yo-yo mind, which kind of yo-yos between anger and desire all the time. We want to have an even mind, because that even mind is so much more pleasurable, so much more happy, that contented mind, than the yo-yo mind, which has always been thrown about in the world, by the world. And it feels like the mind is out of control. That's what it feels like, You look here, you look there, the mind is kind of grabbing you this way, running into the future, going back into the past, and you sit down, you try to meditate, and the mind is all over the place. Have you ever had that experience? Yeah? Okay. It's right. Most people have that experience, right? This is kind of how the mind works. So mindfulness is what stops that. Mindfulness is what allows you to kind of be in charge. You feel in charge of yourself. And you can know how much mindfulness you have by your ability to regulate your emotions and regulate your mind through the day. And if you are the person who is able to kind of catch yourself before you get angry and stop yourself before these things happen, have that kind of even mind, it means that you have a reasonably good level of mindfulness. You also know that when you sit down to meditate, what is your mind like when you meditate? Okay, don't be too hard on yourself if you think a little bit, on... When you sit down for 10 minutes here, it can be very, very hard if you had a busy day or whatever. But if you go on a retreat, for example, and your mind is constantly thinking, then you know that your mindfulness is not super strong yet. You need to build it up over time so that this ruler comes into place. And when your mind is ruled by mindfulness, your life is so much better. Yeah, mindfulness means a lot of happiness. People forget to say this. They say that, oh yeah, mindfulness, you can kind of do this and that. But actually, it's a lot of happiness to be able to feel in charge of yourself. To feel in control of yourself feels great, rather than always being a slave to craving, as they say in the suttas. Yeah, most people, craving has you through the nose, like the bull has a ring in the nose, yeah, and they kind of tie a rope and you can pull the bull around because it's painful to have a ring through your nose. And so we are slaves to craving. Yeah. It's a beautiful idea to be slave to craving, because usually we think the opposite. We think craving, yes, I will get my thing satisfied in the world. I will be happy if I follow my craving. That's usually what we think. Yeah. We don't think of craving as a slave driver. We think that craving is something positive. And also, if I crave, it means that I can do, yeah, and I like to do. I'm a doer. I enjoy doing stuff. Without craving, I can't do anything. What's the point of living? I want to do stuff. So it's satisfied, this urge to do inside. And this is an aspect of the self-view. Yeah, there's an aspect of a personality view, an aspect of the illusion of a self. So you're buying into that illusion, and you are satisfying that feeling, that craving to be the doer, and then you kind of run around in the world. Sometimes we're crazy sometimes, the way we run around in the world. No wonder people can't be peaceful. Mindfulness is the opposite. It rules your mind. You feel in control. You feel in charge. Craving is no longer the slave driver. You know you are in charge. But still, mindfulness is a fairly weak ruler. Yeah, it is not very stable. It can very easily be overthrown. It depends on the kind of the coarse aspect of the hindrances being reduced quite a bit, because when the hindrances are reduced quite a bit, then the mind is more even. But there are more powerful rulers of the mind. And what is that more powerful ruler? It is this one here. All things have stillness as their chief. Yeah, stillness here is samadhi. This is Ajahn Brahm's translation of samadhi. Ajahn Brahm has forbidden me to say concentration. So I said, yes, sir, okay. You have to follow your teacher. You can't so you even... I think Ajahn Brahm is actually very completely right about that. So I think it's a good point, well taken. And Bhante Sujato calls samadhi immersion. So I'm not a fan of immersion, I have to admit. I tried to argue with him, but he wouldn't listen to me. So we all have our ideas. So stillness is the best one. That's Ajahn Brahm's idea. So this means samadhi. So samadhi is the chief. And the reason why samadhi is the chief, of course, is because when you come to samadhi, your defilements are completely suppressed. Yeah, there's no defilements at all. There's no craving that kind of holds you through the nose and pulls you around the world. Your mind is incredibly peaceful and under control. The deeper your meditation is, when you come out of a real deep meditation, you really feel your mind is so powerful, has such an ability to be used in exactly the way you want to use it. With mindfulness, it already helps. But when you come to samadhi, this is empowered 1,000-fold, yeah, because of the depth and the power of that mind. And whatever you tell that mind, the mind is going to do. Yeah, this is why after a deep state of samadhi, that's why people develop all kind of powers at this point, because of the power of the mind. It can do all kind of things. So you feel really in charge of yourself. You feel really enabled to deal with life. Whatever comes at you, you can deal with it one way or another. So stillness is a very, very powerful chief. But is it the highest chief? Or is there one chief even higher than stillness? What do you think? Okay, so Nibbana, okay, yeah. You're on the right track, yeah. You're not completely off the right track. So, well, one of the things that you may notice here is that first I always speak of mindfulness, then we talk of stillness, because I've taken this liberty of turning these things around. But both of these things are called faculties. They're called indriyas in Pali, right? And indriya is a spiritual faculty. And a faculty is something that enables you to do something. It's a power of the mind. Sometimes you talk about the 5 indriyas, sometimes you talk about the 5 balas. Balas are powers of the mind. So these are powers of the mind that enable something to happen. Yeah, they are enablers of the mind. And of course, the 5 indriyas are first the sadindriya, the faculty of confidence or faith. Then you have the virya indriya, virindriya, which is the faculty of energy. Then comes the satindriya, yeah. So it's a very high. The mindfulness indriya is a very high kind of indriya. After you have energy. When we talk about energy in Buddhism, we don't just mean effort. We mean the natural energy, the natural brightness of the mind. So actually, it's a very highly developed state. Then you have the samad indriya, which is the faculty of stillness. Oh, I almost said concentration. Faculty of stillness of the mind, yeah. But the highest of the 5 indriyas are the panyindriya, the faculty of wisdom. So we can expect that wisdom is the next one. And wisdom is the even higher chief. That's what we can expect, yeah. So is it going to be that? That's really cheating, isn't it? Because I know this already. If I were to guess, I probably wouldn't have a clue what to say myself. So I'm being very naughty. So let's see. Oops. There you are. Yeah. So wisdom is the overseer. Yeah, wisdom is like is the kind of thing that stands behind everything. You may have mindfulness, you may have stillness, but unless you have the wisdom to really understand what you're supposed to relate to, how you're supposed to look at things, how you're supposed to see things as impermanent or non-self or whatever, without that wisdom, mindfulness and samadhi have limited abilities to guide you. Yeah, they have limited abilities because they haven't got that view of the world which is correct. And that final thing which comes into place is the wisdom faculty. And it says in the Sutta, as it always says, that the wisdom faculty is the one that stabilizes the 4 other faculties. Yeah, this is the one that kind of makes the whole thing stable and stand, because that sees things in the right way. And because you see things in the right way, the sadindriya, the first of the 5, confidence is firm, it's solid. And because that one is solid, the other 5 kind of arise as a consequence. Everything in Buddhism is causes and conditions. Yeah, so the 5 indriyas are cause. They are a causal sequence. Once the faith is there, the energy is there. If you have very strong faith and confidence, the mind is naturally energized because you feel, yay, I got the Buddha, I got the Dhamma, I got the meaning of life. Wow. And you feel really energized because you have that right faith. Yeah, this is especially, of course, true for the noble ones because they understand what it is really about. But it can happen to anybody. If you really get into the idea of Dhamma, that Dhamma is about the meaning of life, this is what is the path to happiness and away from suffering in a very profound sense. Of course you're going to get excited. You're going to get much more excited than buying an ice cream down the local shop. But sometimes you get really energetic. Yeah, I feel like an ice cream. You get really energized about that. But the Dhamma, you think, yeah, yawn, okay, whatever. You know what it's like? Sometimes we get things really the wrong way around. But so this is why this insight into the teachings are so important, because they give you that thing. So once that is in place, once that overseer is there, the wisdom is there, then the whole thing gets is supported by insight and the right view into the teachings. And then all of these things will become very, very powerful. And you know how to guide yourself all the time. So all things, here again, remember, all things, it means all experiences, right? All your experiences have wisdom as their overseer. So your experience is always guided by wisdom. You never experience dodgy things. You never experience too much anger. You never experience ridiculous amounts of desire anymore. Because wisdom tells you, danger, charcoal pit. Yeah? You know that simile of the charcoal pit? Yeah, some of you know it, right? Is there anyone who does not know the simile of the charcoal pit? One of my favorite similes. You don't have to say if you don't know. I'm sure some of you don't know. But the simile of the charcoal pit is that if you really understand the sensory objects of the world, the sensory pleasures of the world, especially the objects in the world, if you really understand them, you see them as a charcoal pit, glowing, hot charcoals, yeah? And it says in the sutta, it says that it is as if two strong men, like I guess big bodybuilders or whatever, yeah, they grab you one by each arm and they drag you toward this charcoal pit. And this charcoal pit is deeper than a man's height. And the coals are so hot that there is no smoke or nothing. It's just glowing really, really hot. And they will drag you towards this one, about to throw you in. What would you do? You would try to get out, right? You would kind of writhe this way and writhe that way and yell at them, stop, yeah, I don't want to go into this charcoal pit. I'm going to die if I go into that pit. And the Buddha says, that is how you should see the sensory objects of the world. That's kind of really hard to see, isn't it? How is that even possible? This is what I mean by wisdom. Wisdom is often so profound. I don't even know if I should say these things, because maybe it will turn you off Buddhism once and for all. But it says something about, there's something we don't see here. And one of the things that we don't see is that sometimes the enjoyment of the sensory world, there is a lot of craving involved. Yeah, a lot of craving can be very, very strong. When there are sensory enjoyments, that can be very powerful, and then the craving can be very, very super strong. And because the craving is so strong, the mind is actually incredibly agitated. It is incredibly restless. And that restlessness of the mind, that agitation of the mind, that is like the mind is boiling. Yeah, it is like this heat, incredible heat in the mind. And this is the reason why you have these kind of similes used in the suttas. I don't know if any of you have ever smoked cigarettes, but they say, or ever hopefully you haven't used any drugs, but sometimes people have used drugs. And some drugs, and cigarette is apparently one of the most powerful cravings you can have if you smoke cigarettes, if you're really addicted. And that kind of craving, you have at that point when you really have to have that cigarette, but you can't have it because you're on the plane or whatever. Can't smoke on the plane. That kind of thing, where the mind is completely out of control, really, really agitated. Then it's a bit like a charcoal pit. That's how you have to understand it. And many of the pleasures of the world can be a bit like that. So next time you see that beautiful car on the street, I saw it really fast. I think some of these cars are speeding a bit here, even in Singapore. I saw this kind of sports car kind of boom going past. Looked like a very fancy sport car. Remember, charcoal pit, charcoal pit. Then you're on the right track. But I love these teachings by the Buddha because they really challenge you. They make you see things in an entirely new way. And the idea of having a mind that is completely peaceful, completely at ease, not run, not driven by craving, it's very hard to imagine exactly what that is. But the point is that it is a state of happiness almost unimaginably high. We think of, lack of craving. It almost sounds boring, right? Not having any craving. It sounds like I'm going to fall asleep. There's no desire or anything. But of course, the point is it's not about falling asleep at all. It is a state of incredible contentment, happiness, satisfaction. That is really what it is. And I think this is often missing in Buddhism when we talk about these things. And maybe I'm making that mistake right now, that we see the negative of things, but we forget that there is a positive counterpart that is incredibly important to take account of. So wisdom is the overseer here. So let's have a look at the next one here. All things have freedom as their core. And this is kind of interesting. This is interesting because in Buddhism we say nothing has a core, right? This is the idea of non-self, that there is no core, there's no substance to anything. So there is no core to anything. Everything is kind of just this impermanent mass of things, always changing, moving around. So here the Buddha says freedom is the core of all things. So what is that freedom? Well, it is not really something, right? It is not a kind of a mental quality as such. Freedom is like an absence of something here. Yeah? You okay? Yeah.
We are very good. It's just that we cheated.
Yeah.
We went to Thanissaro's translation and we were looking at release and freedom.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it says we have release as the heartwood in Thanissaro's.
Yeah. Well, release and freedom are the same, right?
Indeed. Thank you.
And heartwood. The Pali word is sara, and sara is used for heartwood of a tree because it's the core of the tree, yeah. Or it is used in a kind of in a sense to mean the core of things in general, or any kind of thing, yeah. It's the same meaning basically. So he's just using a slightly different translation there. Yeah. And so the idea is that things don't really have a core, yeah. So freedom is really an absence of something. Freedom is an absence of defilements, is an absence of things that, any negative mental aspects. So it's almost like saying that the core of a person is the absence of something. Yeah? When something is gone, something has disappeared, that is the core. Yeah, because that is the core, because that is kind of the thing that remains when everything else is taken away. Yeah? When everything else is gone, when you have kind of given up the 5 khandhas, you've given up all the attachments, the only thing that remains really is freedom. It's the only thing in the world that once it is established, it cannot disappear again. It is like a permanent change in the mind when you have given up these defilements, right? So it's kind of a different way of thinking about things. It's not a thing that is there. It is an absence of something that actually is there, that remains once freedom has been achieved. So if you're going to talk about permanence in the suttas, or permanence in Buddhism, or permanence the way the Buddha talks about it, it's absence that is permanence. It is achievement of liberation that is permanent. Once you're liberated, there's no way back. If you don't like it, tough luck. That's kind of the... But it's supposed to be good, right? So you should be okay here. All right, so it's a little bit cryptic, that one, but that's one way of thinking about it. The next one, all things culminate in the deathless. Yeah, in other words, things come. This is the end point. I think this simply means that this is the end point of the path. Things go as far as the deathless, and they go no further. Once you come to the deathless, that kind of is that is it. Things kind of end, stop there. They culminate in the deathless. And I think this is synonymous with the next one. I'll just go to the next one straight away. All things have extinguishment as their final end. Extinguishment here is nibbana, and final end is pariyosana, means the ending or the of something. So all things end in nibbana. Remember again that the idea of all things here, sabbe Dhamma, means all of experience, right? So again, the idea that all experience ends with nibbana. There's nothing beyond that. Sabbe Dhamma literally means all things. So anything that you can experience ends at this particular point. There's nothing at all happening beyond this. Extinguishment is the final end of everything here. Again, it's very profound. Yeah, it's really, really deep, these things. And the Buddha really kind of laying it on the line what these things are about. And for some reason, this is one reason why these teachings are so interesting, even though they are a little bit obscure and a little bit unusual. They kind of bring out things that sometimes you don't see. And then when you see that, and then you compare it to the rest of the suttas, then they kind of slot in quite nicely. But they give you that additional confirmation of things that you will know through the Dhamma normally. Okay, so I don't know what do you think. What do you think, Hui Kim? Were you happy with this one, or are you?
Very happy.
Okay, okay, marvelous. So maybe before I go on to the next sutta, which I may do, are there any questions about this one? Any complaints about this one? Any?
Are there any questions from the floor? Oh, okay.
May I digress a bit?
You want to digress? Okay. Yeah, all right. Try and check it out, see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned from somewhere, I can't remember where.
Yeah.
It was said that conditioned mind is the source of all suffering because it imposes conditional framework on unconditional reality. And then if conditioned mind is the cause of suffering, is unconditioned mind the freedom, and is unconditioned mind the freedom in all situations, or is it unconditioned mind also can cause some suffering?
Yeah, so it is, remember the point that we have to use these terms kind of carefully, because everything is context, and everything is kind of, you have to see things in context. So the word unconditioned, that is usually translated as unconditioned, is asankata in Pali. Yeah. And asankata is usually a synonym for nibbana. So it is a particular kind of sankata, particular kind of conditioning we're talking about. Because the mind is always conditioned. Yeah? Conditioning just means that the mind depends on circumstances. Yeah? Even an arahant's mind is conditioned. It has to be, because if I look at the light, well, I see light. That's what I see in my mind. Yeah? If I look at the flags, I see flag. So it's conditioned by where I look. And the feeling I get will also depend on those things. So even the arahant's mind is conditioned, but it is not conditioned by certain things. It's not conditioned by greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah? So this is kind of what is important here. It's a sankata in the sense that those nibbana also is actually is defined in that way in the suttas. Nibbana is defined as the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. So nibbana is the mind of an arahant. That is synonymous with a sankata, so it means you're not conditioned in that way. So to talk about the unconditioned mind has a very specific meaning here, because the mind is always conditioned in one way or another until the arahant dies completely. Then of course all conditioning finishes, because then everything comes to a stop. So that is really the thing. So you have to kind of again separate out a little bit and see how things see how they apply in a sense. Does that make sense? Maybe not? Okay. Okay, think about it and get back to me later on.
Thank you, Ajahn. Are there any other questions? Ajahn, I think we have some questions on Zoom.
Yeah, okay. Fire away. Not literally, but metaphorically.
Facebook, sorry. The first question is, wouldn't ignorance be the root of all things?
In a sense it is, because ignorance is the kind of the thing behind the craving. So you can say that. But remember, craving and desire is really an active force. Ignorance is almost like a passive thing which is there, you don't know, but it's not really so much of a force. Craving is the thing that drives the rebirth process. Yeah, you have just looked at the second noble truth just the other day, and craving is the thing that actually drives the process. But behind craving is ignorance. So ignorance blocks you from seeing things according to reality, and then craving comes in, and that projects you into the future, drives on the rebirth process from one life to the next one. So it depends on how you see it. You can think you can see it in both ways. But usually it is craving that is the source of suffering in the suttas, and for that reason it is the source of the continuation of the five khandhas, which really is what suffering is defined as in the suttas.
Thank you, Ajahn. Another question is, can we replace freedom with emptiness?
Yes, you probably can. Because emptiness in the Theravada tradition, or emptiness in the suttas, it means emptiness of a self, or what belongs to a self. That's what it refers to. So freedom is precisely that understanding that things are empty of a self and empty of what belongs to a self. So when you fully see that emptiness, then that is when you are free. I think the difference is that emptiness is always true. It is true right now. Yeah. This is the weird thing. You're empty now. It just doesn't feel like it. It feels like I'm here. Surely I'm here. It feels like I'm here. So, but the point is that emptiness is always true. Yeah, and this is kind of the strange things about non-self. People are really afraid of the non-self idea, because what are you going to do? You're going to take away myself? I want to be here. I don't want to be taken away. But of course the point is that there is no self there in the first place. Right now there is no self. And whatever self idea we have, that is the problem. The problem is the delusion, the illusion of things. So you're already empty here. Yeah, so that is the difference between the two. You're already empty. You just have to realize that you're empty. And when you realize emptiness, non-self, that is when freedom comes as a consequence. So it's not exactly the same, but it is closely related to each other here.
Thank you, Ajahn. Just two more questions. Apologies for my ignorance, Ajahn, but doesn't existence have to happen first before we can desire, pay attention, make contact, or feel? So, if we didn't exist in the first place, we wouldn't have to now learn to stop desire, stop paying attention, stop making contact, and stop feeling. I'm also wondering if we reach nirvana, we can still re-exist again and start the whole cycle again. Sorry if you find my questions bold and rude. It just shows I'm very ignorant and have no wisdom. No problem. Anybody can send in any questions. Ajahn will be...
Okay. All right. So the answer is that, yes, you have to exist first of all, but existence is a given, right? That's kind of the point. We know that we exist. You don't really have to kind of... that's already a given. So when it says that all things are rooted in desire, it means that you're already existing, and then you are perpetuating all of those things by re-existing all the time. So there isn't any first point in existence, but then we are perpetuating it, keeping the ball rolling, keeping samsara rolling by continuing the craving and the desire. That's exactly true. Can you restart it after Nibbana? Well, there's nothing there to restart it anymore. Yeah, to restart things, you need something. You need a spark. You need some kind of initial input. You need existence first, right? Just like you're saying. And if there is no existence, if there's nothing there to can restart the thing, if everything is gone, there is no way to restart it. It's impossible. So once you're gone, you're gone. That's the problem. So then you're gone. And actually, that's the good thing. Yeah, once you're gone, you're gone. So, but no restarting can happen.
Yep. Thank you, Ajahn. Would appreciate it if you would give some guidance on how to catch the impulse on a just-in-time basis at the time when it arises. She's talking about mindfulness. Mindfulness seems to have a lagging effect against the ability to catch the latent tendency on a timely basis.
Yeah, it depends on how strong your mindfulness is. That's really the critical thing. Yeah, so the stronger your mindfulness is, the more ability you have to catch things in time. So sometimes you're right, sometimes it's like, you can feel a bit of negativity or ill will arising or whatever, and then you catch it at least before it is too late, before you're really, really angry, and then you can do something about it. But the earlier you catch it, the more easy it is to deal with it. Because once these things get a foothold in the mind, they become very strong. It's very hard to get rid of. So it's just about, you need to continue developing that mindfulness. And the way to develop the mindfulness is the first 6 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah, so that's really where so much of the work is really in those first 6 factors. And this is why, the idea of emphasizing kindness and emphasizing right view, listening to the Dhamma, understanding what is going on, understanding where happiness is to be found, and understanding where it is not to be found, combined with the idea of just living really well, not doing bad things, living with kindness, why that is so incredibly important, because it is the foundation for mindfulness. And if you haven't got that foundation for mindfulness, the only way to be mindful is through an act of will. And if you try to be mindful through an act of will, you won't succeed, because after a while you get tired. After a while you're worn out, because you have to kind of grit your teeth. I'm going to be mindful, and you just can't do it after a while. So and then when you are tired, then you lose mindfulness even more. So act of will doesn't really work. So the answer to mindfulness is always putting the conditions into place. Then mindfulness will happen.
Ajahn, sorry, there's one question from Sis Michelle. Would that be okay? One last question.
Yeah, of course.
Sis Michelle asks, is desire chanda or tanha?
The different words, and they mean not exactly the same thing. Tanha means thirst. So tanha means like really strong kind of craving, strong desires. Chanda has a number of different meanings, but it means desire in a much more general sense. It can mean good desires. It can mean the desire to do good things, but it can also mean the desire to do bad things. It can mean the whole thing. But whether you do good or whether you do bad is not so important, because any desire that projects you into the future in one way or another, which all desires do, will lead to rebirth. And that's why chanda drives the process of existence. So there's lots of words for desire in Buddhism, and they have slightly kind of different connotations depending on context and depending on how they're used, etc. All right, so shall we look at another sutta? You're sure? Okay. This is quite a complex sutta, so I'm going to kind of go through it in a very light touch way. So I hope you don't mind, because this can in theory take a long time to do, and I'm not as well prepared as I should be with this sutta. So I hope you're able to follow my random stuff here. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so he just finishes off. That is how you should answer the wanderers who follow other paths. So next time anyone from another religion come and ask you these questions, you know what to say. So there you are, education they call that. So now we go on to the next sutta. This sutta is called the Three Qualities, the Tayo Dhamma Sutta. We are still in the Anguttara Nikaya 10s, number 76. You know this one, Venerable? Not Venerable, 𝐻𝐒𝐾𝐈𝐒?
Not venerable yet. I've still got hair. Not quite. I don't recall.
Okay, now maybe when I start going through it, you will recognize it. Without giving up three things, you can't give up rebirth, old age, and death. What three? Greed, hate, and delusion. Remember that one? So this is the Tayo Dhamma Sutta. So it starts off with three things, and then it says, well, to be able to give up these three things, rebirth, old age, and death, you have to give up three other things. And then it says, to give up those three things, you have to give up another three things. To give up those three things, you have to give up another three things. To give up those, you have to give up another three things. And it has 10 stages like that. So altogether it's 3 times 10, 30 qualities. So kind of exciting, and lots of things going on there. So this is, and I must admit, I read this sutta for years, and I never really understood exactly how it worked, until one day I found the key to this understanding the sutta. I'm going to share that key with you today. That's kind of why. This is why I thought I would have a look at this. But before I do that, I just want to go through the sutta in a quick sequence so you can see what is going on here. So to give up rebirth, old age, and death, this is jati, jara, and marana. Jati, I call it rebirth, and the reason I translate jati as rebirth is because the word jati usually translated as birth, but the reason I call it rebirth is because in ancient India, any instance of birth was an instance of rebirth. That was a cultural view. So if we just translate as birth into English, because English you have no conception of rebirth unless it is stated explicitly, birth is just birth. It's got nothing to do with rebirth. So unless we explicitly say rebirth, people won't get it, that that's actually what it means in the Indian mind. So if you want to approach what they were talking about, we have to render it as rebirth. That's why I translate in this way here. Well, actually, it's not even my translation. But anyway, then there's old age and death. So these are the things that we want to avoid in this world because they are problematic. What do you have to give up these three things? You have to give up greed, hate, and delusion, lobha, dosa, moha, or desire, ill will, and confusion, or something like that. So what do you have to give up these three things? Without giving up three things, you can't give up greed, hate, and delusion. What three? Identity view, doubt, and the grasping of precepts and observances. And then it goes on like this, without giving up three things. It goes on and on and on, all the way to the very end, the rock bottom of this thing. So I'm going to, because it is so much text, I'm going to put this in a schematic form so you can see it more clearly what is going on here. So it starts off with rebirth, old age, and death. That is the root problem. This is shorthand for suffering, the round of suffering, always kind of attaching and dying and getting old and getting sick again and then kind of going round and round, and then all of these problems that life throws at us, sometimes we should just discuss the idea of dukkha, of suffering, because sometimes people don't understand what dukkha actually means. And people think, well, I don't understand, what do you mean dukkha? My life is fine. What's the problem? Okay, you need to listen. So maybe we should have a kind of a session just explaining what actually dukkha refers to in Buddhism. So anyways, we'll just assume that you have some idea of that. So yeah, it comes from greed, hate, and delusion. Yeah, that's the cause for these things. Yeah, and again, this may not be obvious, but we can't go into all of these details now. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly just to show you the basics first of all. This comes from three things: identity view, sakkaya ditthi, doubt, vicikiccha, grasping of precepts and observances, sila batta paramasa. And these are the things that you give up when you become a stream enterer, right? So first you become a stream enterer, then you give up greed, hate, and delusion when you become an arahant, and then as a consequence you give up rebirth, old age, and death. So what are the things that you have to give up these three fetters of stream entry? You have to give up improper attention, following a wrong path, and mental sluggishness. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? That now it's becoming a little bit harder to follow because it's not entirely clear what this means. What has this got to do with stream entry? It's not entirely obvious. So I'm not going to say too much about it now, I'm just going to go through it. And one thing I can say is that following the wrong path has to do with, I'll talk about it later on. Then the next one is absent-mindedness, mutta sati, or unmindfulness if you like, lack of situational awareness, and a distracted mind. So these are all various kinds of defilements of the mind, if you like, and lack of steadiness of the mind. The mind isn't fully mindful, etc. Yeah? Then we have not wanting to see the noble ones, not wanting to hear the teaching of the noble ones, and a fault-finding mind. Yeah, that's obviously problematic if you don't want to see the noble ones. If you think, yeah, the Buddha, who needs the Buddha? Yeah, go back to the forest, the Buddha. And you have a fault-finding mind. These teachings are just whatever. Yeah. Then we have restlessness, lack of restraint, and unethical conduct is the cause of that. And now you may wonder what the logic is. There any logic here at all? Can you see any logic in this? I'll be very impressed if you can see logic in this. Then we have faithlessness, uncharitableness, and laziness is the cause of that. Then we have disregard, being hard to admonish, and having bad friends. And then we have the last one, lack of conscience, imprudence, and negligence at the very root. So there is actually a system here. And you may be very surprised to hear that, because it looks like a number of random things just thrown together in this way. Yeah, so it can be quite difficult to see. And one of the reasons why it is hard to understand what is going on here is that one of the factors probably is in the wrong place. Yeah, this is one of the reasons. So, to be able to discern these kind of things, where the factors are supposed to be, and whether there is kind of a transmission error in the suttas, what you have to do is you have to compare this sutta with parallel suttas in other languages. And this particular sutta happens to also appear in a Sanskrit version and also in a version in Chinese language. And when you compare this sutta to those other versions of the sutta in Sanskrit and Chinese, you find something very interesting here. And what we find is the following. So this factor here of not wanting to see the noble ones, not wanting to hear the teaching of the noble ones, and a fault-finding mind actually appears in a different place. It seems to be that in the Pali, it may have come in the wrong sequence. Maybe there's been a misremembering. You can imagine there's 30 factors here, very easy to misremember and kind of get the sequence wrong. So where should it be? And this is the answer. So you move down, instead of being factor number 5, you take it down to number 6, no, number 8. And then, when you do this, now this is where I feel a bit embarrassed, because this is where I have this really complicated table, and you probably won't be able to make heads nor tails of this particular table. But when you reorder it like this, in accordance with the Chinese and the Sanskrit version of the sutta, and it looks to me like the Pali is wrong because the sequence in the Pali doesn't match with other sequences. Yeah? So what we have is the following here. Can you see that? So what you see now is that the sequence in this particular sutta is exactly the same as you can find in places like the Noble Eightfold Path. Or in this other sutta called the Avijja Sutta, this is the middle column there, has AN 1061 on top. This is the Avijja Sutta, and this is also a very nice sutta that shows you the path in a certain sequence. So what you see here is that now it all falls nicely into place, because there is a lot of the basic factors here are basically the same. So for example, at the very top there, you have right liberation and right knowledge. Yeah, that is the tenfold path. So in Buddhism, you have the eightfold path, you have the tenfold path. The tenfold path only adds the idea of understanding and knowledge at the very end of the path. And that is the same as you have knowledge and freedom in the middle one. And then you have the idea of giving up rebirth, old age, giving up greed, hate, and delusion, and identity view. All of that has to do with also with knowledge and freedom. That fits in really well. Then you have the next level down. You have the Noble Eightfold Path. You have right samadhi. Yeah, Samma Samadhi, you can see it there, starting on the right-hand side. And then you go one step to the left, you see the 7 awakening factors, right? 7 awakening factors are also about samadhi. And then you go one step further left, and you wonder, where is the samadhi here? And the place where the samadhi is here is in following the wrong path. If you follow the right path, yeah, this is kumagga in Pali, the right path is the Noble Eightfold Path. And the culmination and the full expression of the Noble Eightfold Path happens in Samma Samadhi. That's when the path comes together, yeah? So following the right path really means also attaining the jhanas and attaining samadhi at the very highest stages. So that is actually equivalent to samadhi, that one there. It may not be obvious at all unless someone points it out, but that actually is the case. Then you go down one further, you have right mindfulness on the very left-hand side. And then you have, in the middle one, you have the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation, which is exactly the same thing as right mindfulness. And then in the left-hand column, you have giving up unmindfulness or absent-mindedness, if you like, yeah, and having situational awareness and all of these things, which also are very closely related to the idea of mindfulness meditation, obviously. Yeah. Then we go down one more. On the left-hand side, you have right effort, right livelihood, right action, right speech. These are all the factors that have to do with sila on the Buddhist path. Yeah, this is all about virtue. You go to the middle one, you have the 3 kinds of good conduct, sense restraint, mindfulness and situational awareness also is all about conduct, including mental conduct. And then you go to the very left side, and you have again unethical conduct, lack of restraint, and then you have the additional one of restlessness there. Right intention, right? Right intention. Faith is what gives rise, is very close to right intention, because when you have faith in something or confidence in a certain teaching, then your intention becomes right because it aligns with those teachings. Confidence in the word of the Buddha means you start to think about the world in a different way. You start to apply yourself in a different way. You have right intention. That is what it means, heading towards a different goal. This is very similar to giving up faithlessness, right? And then it adds uncharitableness and laziness as part of that idea. Then we come down to right view. Right view is similar to listening to the true teaching and associating with good people. That's where right view comes from. And now you can see why I moved that green one down. Yeah, that's the one I moved down before. I mean, maybe you think I'm cheating, but I say I'm not. I say I'm just being really wise about this. So there it has, you giving up in other words, you want to see the noble ones and you want to hear the teaching, yeah, and you give up the fault-finding mind. Now it fits really well. But if that had been moved up 3 spots, very hard to see how it fits. So by adjusting the Pali in line with the Sanskrit and the Chinese language version, suddenly things fit into place. And then the sutta on the left, it adds 2 more steps at the very beginning. And these steps are quite easy to understand, because the first one, giving up disregard, really means like being disrespectful and having bad friends. And at the very root is the idea of negligence. If you are a negligent person who is not heedful, who is not careful about how you live, you're not going to get anywhere. You are blocked from having any progress at all on any kind of spiritual path, because you have no insight into your life. You have no interest in trying to understand what life is all about. You have no interest in trying to be a better person or anything like that. And then you have a really big problem as a consequence. So that is, to me, the critical thing in understanding the sutta, is to move that thing down 2 steps, and suddenly it falls into place. Just 1 second. Okay, so there's a couple of maybe other things that I should mention very briefly. There are a couple of other things that don't seem quite right. And you will notice I have the yellow thing there is a proper attention and improper attention. This is yoniso manasikara and ayoniso manasikara. Yeah? Giving up ayoniso manasikara is the same thing as having yoniso manasikara. But they are in different places, right? So how come they are in different places? Maybe there's something more wrong with this sutta. And I think the answer is that no, I don't think there is anything more wrong with the sutta. But a thing like yoniso manasikara is something that is useful all the way along the path. Yeah, it is something that you use even when you start out, when the first time you listen to the Buddha's teaching, and when you listen to the Buddha's teaching the first time, yoniso manasikara is what actually allows you to appreciate these teachings. Whenever you decide to live better, to be kind, to have a kind thought rather than having a harsh thought against someone, that's yoniso manasikara. But it is especially powerful towards the very end of the path. Yeah, on the left-hand column there, that yoniso manasikara there is what comes just before you become a stream enterer. Yeah, so that is the kind of the critical point at which you have to have wise attention, because that stream entry point is where you, for the first time, see reality fully as it actually is, and that requires that wise attention towards the very end of the path. So I think that difference in sequence there is not actually significant, because yoniso manasikara is something which belongs on all the various stages of the path. And then you have this slight difference in situational awareness, but you will notice is really very closely linked to each other. One is with the 4 mindfulness meditations, the other one is more with right effort, and that kind of fits with how it is used in the sutta sometimes. Sometimes it's used with one, sometimes with the other, so that I don't think is a big problem here. So, now I have probably confused you utterly and completely. So let's just try to summarize this a little bit in a better way here. So let's go through this in a little bit more detail so I can try to show you what actually is going on here now that we have sorted out the right sequence. So we have, at the beginning, we have rebirth, old age, and death. So this is the problem, right? We saw this already. And then the reason why we have rebirth, old age, and death is that we have these root defilements that drive the round of rebirth. As long as we have those root defilements, we're going to be reborn. We're going to carry on in samsaric existence. So you have to get rid of those. Then you get rid of rebirth, old age, and death. To get rid of those, which are basically arahantship, you have to become a stream enterer first. You have to give up identity view, doubt, and grasping precepts and observances. Identity view is this view that there is a self inside. It's a view that I exist in a certain way, and that can be in any relation to the 5 khandhas. This is why the 5 khandhas are so important, because that is where the identity view, the sense of I, resides somewhere inside those 5 khandhas. So once you overcome identity view, once you understand that there is no self there, then of course doubt is completely gone, because you have seen exactly what is going on. You have the grasping of precepts and observances. This is the third of these 3 fetters that you have. And this basically just means that we grasp onto things like any precepts, any observances, meaning anything that you do as a religious practice, whatever it might be. You hold on to these things because they are, basically, you think that they're going to lead you to enlightenment or whatever. That's why you grasp onto these things. But of course, once you become a stream mentor, no need to grasp anymore, because you know what these things are, and you practice them automatically. So stream entry leads to arahantship, which leads to the ending of all suffering here. Oops. Now we come to the idea of improper attention again, that I was mentioning before. To be able to make the breakthrough to become a stream mentor, to be able to see that all the 5 khandhas are empty of a self, you have to look in exactly the right place. This is the kind of the epitome of of careful attention, right? You have to know exactly where to look, and only when you look in exactly the right place can you possibly make that breakthrough and see things and become a stream mentor. So this is where the idea of proper attention is actually incredibly important at this particular point. So this is why this is really important right here. So you pay attention. How exactly do you pay attention? And what you pay attention to in this particular case is that you come out of a state of samadhi, and then you evaluate that state of samadhi itself as impermanent, as problematic, as empty of a self. That is the proper attention here. To be able to do that, you have to follow the right path. This is what I mentioned before, about this is where samadhi comes in as part of that path. And one of the kind of factors that stop you from gaining the full samadhi is if the mind isn't fully charged up and super bright. Any kind of mental sluggishness will stop you from doing that. And of course, absent-mindedness is the opposite of the Satipatthana practice. Satipatthana is what leads to samadhi, one of the very important kind of things that become very clear in the suttas when you read them. Satipatthana is the path to samadhi, and part of that is the situational awareness. Situational awareness here is a translation of sati sampajanya. So it is the understanding that what you are doing, you do the right thing for the right purpose in your life. You do things that are suitable, that lead you on the path. You don't do unsuitable things. And then you have the distracted mind. The distracted mind is the mind which is not fully focused on what you're doing. And the reason it isn't fully focused is because you haven't got the mindfulness. Mindfulness, again, is this power, is the faculty that allows you to be in charge of your mind. And if you're not fully in charge, then the mind will be distracted. Restlessness, lack of sense restraint, and unethical conduct. So lack of sense restraint is when again the mind is overcome by defilements. You're not able to overcome the ill will or the desires that arise in the mind when you just allow the mind to run riot in the world. And because you're allowing the mind to do its own thing without being in charge, it becomes restless, it becomes agitated. So this is like an increase in restlessness compared to the other one. The other one was distracted mind. That's a very small amount of restlessness. Here is a much larger one because of that lack of restraint. So you can see the increase in defilements as we go back in the sequence. And unethical conduct here is really the idea that mental phenomena, mental conduct is part of ethical conduct in Buddhism. So here all of ethics really come together in sense restraint, because that is where you overcome the mental part. Am I making sense to anyone? It's not too late for things to make sense? Okay, good. And what is it that drives the ethical conduct and faith is faithlessness, right? You haven't got faith in the path, you haven't got kind of inspired by the Buddha, you don't have that confidence or whatever. And that is what then means that you haven't got the foundation for really living an ethical life. You need to have confidence in something. You need to have faith in something which kind of leads you in that direction. So faith here is something that kind of happens very early, and it is always based on hearing the teaching of the noble ones. Reading the suttas, being around the Buddha, hearing it from someone who can explain these things with the right character or whatever. That is where confidence comes from, because you see something. You see conduct, or you hear teachings that come with that conduct that actually leads you to, really understand what ethics is all about. So confidence and faith is a kind of actually a very important part of the Buddhist path. It is not just something that you have in Christianity or whatever. It also occurs in Buddhism. In Buddhism, it's a bit more related to wisdom, a bit more related to the idea of confidence, of trying to understand what is going on. But it has a similar kind of emotional push on you. That's kind of the idea here. And interestingly, it is coupled with not being charitable, not being generous, and laziness. It was kind of fascinating. Faith leads to generosity. Faith leads you to want to live in the right way, because you want to be generous towards those things, especially that you have faith in. And you lose your laziness, because once you have faith, then you want to act on that faith. This is kind of where energy comes from. I just mentioned before the idea of the 5 faculties, starting with the sad indriya and then leading to the viri indriya, one faculty leading to the next one, and then that is what you see here, laziness and faith being coupled with each other. And as I mentioned before, now you can see why the noble ones fit in very beautifully here, because when you see the noble ones and you hear the teachings and you don't have the fault-finding mind with them, that is where faith and confidence arises from, comes from that whole idea. And then that again comes from the idea of you have to have some foundation in respect. If you have no respect, then you're not going to listen to anyone who is noble, because you don't have any respect for them. And you already have bad friends who are leading you in the wrong direction, and you are hard to admonish. That's kind of interesting. If you have bad friends, it means that you are someone who doesn't take to being corrected by anyone else. You are stubborn. You're not willing to listen to what other people have to say. And of course, then there is no hope, there is no chance of moving forward. And then the very last one is the idea of negligence, pamada, and hiriotapa, these guardians of the world. Here called conscience. Conscience is hiri, and that just means that you feel bad if you do something wrong. I don't know if you do something wrong in life and you don't want other people to know about it. That means you have a bit of shame about it. Oh, don't tell anyone else. I feel bad about that. That is kind of what hiri is about. And otapa is the idea of being fearful of the consequences. And here called imprudence, but it really means you understand that the consequences of your actions actually are problematic. And of course, negligence is the idea of being heedless and not careful with how you live. So, I just have gone through this very, very fast. It really deserves a lot of explanation, a lot of discussion. This is a super fast going through, but it's... there just isn't enough time to go through this one in all detail. I think when I did it at Bodhinyana Monastery last rains, I think I went through, took about 4 or 5 hours altogether to go through this, if you want to go through it in detail. But it gives you a rough idea. And what is really neat about it is, and this is what I really like about it, one of the reasons I wanted to mention it, is because it shows you the power of comparative study. Taking a sutta, comparing it to parallel versions of the sutta somewhere else, and suddenly things fall into place. Because it is inevitable in the course of Buddhist history that suttas have changed, that there have been misunderstandings and misrememberings. That is par for the course. So this shows you that sometimes little corrections like this can make things become even more clear. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. So that is it.
Thank you, Ajahn. Really has the wow factor. Can we say sadhu 3 times, please?
All right. Okay, so what do we do now?
Are there any questions from the floor?
Sorry?
Are there any... Oh, there's a
Yeah.
question from the floor.
Yeah, okay.
In the Google, when I Google Tibetan monks or Zen monks,
Yeah.
A lot of scandals, like Tibetan monks, sex scandals in USA, leading Zen monks also sex scandal in USA. Those are the leaders of the Zen sect, leaders of the Tibetan FPMT Federation, Foundation for the Preservation of Mahayana Tradition, including the Dalai Lama accused of not addressing the woman's treated as sex slave, tantric sex slave, ignoring her plea. And then Zen monk accused of justifying the Japanese war in East Asia,
Yeah.
providing the spiritual justification for the Holy War. And then how do we have confidence if the Buddhist teachings and Sangha, if the militant monks in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and then in Thailand also, in China also, then Singapore also, how do we have confidence in the Sangha if the Buddhist teachings don't lead them to good, and then so many bad sheep among them appear?
Okay. It's a good question. So what you have to do is you have to realize that Sangha are human beings, like everyone else. There's going to be good ones and bad ones. And if there are bad ones, well, they are bad. So turn away, turn a different direction. And the Buddhist history is full of Sangha members who have done bad things. And you look at the world, how many monastics are actually keeping the precepts in a pure way, and it's a very tiny proportion of monastics around the world. There's a problem everywhere. So what you should do is you should see that understand that you can't have faith in those. It doesn't mean though that everything is rotten in Buddhism. You have to be careful with generalizing based on these cases. If you generalize, you end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as the saying goes. There is still a baby there. You have to look for the baby. Check out the bathwater, not the baby. Hold on to the baby. And this is the thing. Sometimes you see people in life that actually are worthy of respect. You see people who are probably very well practiced, who have kept the precepts in a very pure way for decades. And when you meet them, you can feel that there is a certain power about them in terms of metta and kindness and mindfulness and awareness, and you get this feeling, And there's many monks I can, talk about, but who have these kind of qualities, but you're going to have to look for them for yourself and just be observant. And so what you should do is when you see bad conduct, you shouldn't close your eyes to it, pretend that it is okay. You should, bad conduct, I'm going to give up my confidence in those particular monks and place it somewhere else. But don't give up Buddhism just because of that. Because remember that what we are dealing with, we're dealing with human beings. And human beings have all kinds of defilements and desires, and that will come out everywhere, anywhere. It can come out at any time. One of the problems in the Tibetan tradition is that you have all of these Tibetan monks around the world, and it's spread out into the whole world basically because of they had to leave Tibet, so you had this massive diaspora of Tibetan monks around the world. And of course, suddenly they found themselves in positions they weren't used to. They found themselves in positions of power that they never had in their home country. And because they were just ordinary monks, and they were out of their element, and they didn't have any support from the monastic community in Tibet, they ended up finding themselves in situations where they had too much power, too much ability to enjoy unwholesome sensual pleasures. And because of that, they got corrupted. in a sense, it's almost to be expected when you think about it, because they were put in a kind of vulnerable position without having the foundation in wisdom and samadhi that they should have had. That's really what happened. The problem is that we tend to worship people or respect people often for the wrong reasons, without looking properly, first of all. And we respect them, we assume that they are good and great just because they are monks. And I think Westerners fall prey to these things a lot, yeah, because you see this kind of exotic monk from Tibet, you think, wow, this is really different, yeah, must be enlightened because of the headgear or something like that. And there is a tendency for that, yeah, because they are so different and the culture is so different, we tend to kind of read things into them which actually isn't there, instead of actually looking at the qualities, yeah. So we should always do our homework, yeah. And when we start to do our homework, we will see that there are good monks, there are good monastics, there are good lay people everywhere, but you have to look carefully to find them, and be honest, never pretend that it is good when it isn't.
Thank you, Ajahn. Yes, certainly follow the good monks like Ajahn Brahmali, Ajahn Brahmali. Yeah. Sis Sylvia, you have a question?
I don't have a question, Ajahn. I have a comment and I have a thought to share.
Yeah.
First, I've read the Sutta before, but you are absolutely right. The first time I read it, it made no sense. I mean, it's like random points being packed together.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful, Ajahn, you offered us a key, and I found the key extremely useful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have a thought. I mean, going through this very carefully, a couple of thoughts came to mind. One, this is very much conditional arising. Set the correct 3 conditions, the next is possible.
Yeah.
So I thought that was brilliant. The second point I want to make is this. The way that this sutta had been cast is without giving up 3 things. The next cannot happen. That got me thinking. I think if we go right down to the bottom, the lowest point, what it seems to suggest is that the typical Putujana, the lay person, the regular person, the regular person has a tendency to hold on to those things. And therefore, he has to make effort to let it go, to overcome those conditions. So just as an example, let's just go straight up to number 9. Disregard, being hard to admonish, having bad friends. The typical regular person, once you want to tell him he's wrong, the instinct is to actually harden your position and not like being told. The instinct, if you have friends, good or bad, if you call them friends, it is actually not easy to let them go. So looking at this, it's like every level is actually a description of our habits, our instincts. And because we are so reluctant to let go of those instincts, we can't rise to the next level. So,
yes.
Because you pointed out that this is in accordance with the Eightfold Path in sequence, then really we will have to be very mindful about the negativities that we have, that we refuse to let go of. And only when we can, with understanding, let those go, then we can move on.
Good. Yeah, no, I think that's a very good way of putting it, actually. Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. And it is actually very hard, as you say. It is.
How does breathing?
As you say, it is very hard to let go. And you know, for a lot of us, many of these most basic things have already been let go because we have pretty good friends and we are not negligent and we are careful and what have you. But there's still many bad habits of the mind, especially. And those are incredibly hard to let go of. You know, you have habits of getting irritated or whatever, or you have habits of desires. And actually that is something almost everyone struggles with. And that is where the kind of the lot of the hard work of the Buddhist path has to be done. This is what kind of right effort and all of these things are about, and right view and looking at things in the right way, etc. So, yes.
Thank you, Ajahn. In the interest of time, can we just do one last question from Zoom and from Facebook? Or shall we take one from the floor? Ajahn, I think you have to decide. We'll have one last question. Ajahn has to get up early tomorrow. The floor or Zoom?
Yeah, and let's take it from the floor. I think that's better,
sure.
because we are all people are here.
Yeah,
so
just
better.
do a quick one. I have a question about stream entry.
Yeah.
It seems to be a defining point of time. So I just wondering, how do we be sure that we are entering the right
How to be
stream?
sure you enter the stream? Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. First of all, it takes a long way of practice on the path. Yeah, first of all, you have to attain some state of samadhi, and samadhi means a very deep state of meditation. So if you haven't really had a very deep state of samadhi, it's very unlikely you will be a stream enterer. Yeah. So, but how you know is that you have like a revolution in consciousness. One day everything is upside down, and you think, wow, what I thought was happiness is actually suffering. What I thought was suffering is actually happiness. And it's a kind of a shift, a massive shift in consciousness. That is how you know. So you always remember, if you have a stream entry, you never forget it for the rest of your life. It's like the shock of a lifetime, but a positive shock, what they call a positive trauma. You think, yay, I'm a stream entry. Whoa, so cool. So that's kind of stream entry. It's very, very, it's like a big occasion, yeah. So, yeah. There you are. Okay, shall we do the Arahang Sammasambuddho? Kim, are you ready?
Yes, we should. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Share merit.
I think we have a quick sharing of merits for two departed.
All right. Okay, sharing merits
sorry
first.
about that.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's share the merits first of all. So here we go.
You want to show the two slides?
Okay.
Yeah, we'd like to share merits with Mr. Lim Tong Hock, who just passed away on the 14th of May. And also Madam Lee Chua Ti, who passed away on the 2nd of May, as well as everybody else's relatives and friends who passed away.
Okay, here we go. Edang men yate nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Edang men yate nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Edang men yate nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo.
May we request a short blessing from
Short
Ajahn?
blessing? Yeah. Okay. Short blessing. Here we go. Nati me saranang anyang, Buddho me saranang varang, etena sacava, jena sote te hotu sa, badanati me saranang, anyang Dhammo me saranang varang, etena sacava, jena sote te hotu sa, badanati me saranang anyang, Sangho me saranang varang, etena sacava, jena sote te hotu sabada.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay. So, very good. Let's do the Arahang Sammasambuddho together.
sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.